Today, we discuss the third and final presidential debate on what was said and what was meant. Then we take a look at James O Keefe's video on whether his claims hold any water with a man who has falsified videos in the past. Four UNLV panelists are with us today to hash it all out. Thank you for joining us. This is The Scramble. Welcome and thank you for joining us. Our guests today are KUNV host Lee Gilford, political analyst Brenden Soliwoda, UNLV political science graduate David Serabian, and Greenspun College of Urban Affairs Director of Advising Rimi Marwah. We begin on our first topic. Well, it happened, and it is done. The final presidential debate concluded here on campus of UNLV. Last night, the trucks packed and the tents have been taken down, and the campus is slowly returning to normalcy. Unfortunately, that return to normalcy has not yet happened for the rest of the country as candidates take back some statements and reaffirm others. Let's start out on one of the bigger moments of the night and move from there. One of the first things we should touch on and look at is Hillary's attack on Trump's wall and visit to Mexico. Let's take a look at her words exactly.
When it comes to the wall that Donald talks about building, he went to Mexico. He had a meeting with the Mexican president, didn't even raise it. He choked and then got into a Twitter war because the Mexican president said, we're not paying for that wall. So I think we are both a nation of immigrants and we are a nation of laws, and that we can act accordingly.
So a lot to unpack there. We have on Hillary's side saying that Trump choked and had a Twitter war, and Trump's response was that she wanted border security, or AKA a wall, in the first place. Brenden, I'm going to toss this to you and ask you, do you think Hillary landed a punch here? And do you think Trump was able to have a good enough defense?
I actually think it's really indicative of how the whole night went between the two of them. I think he choked throughout. And I love that she nailed him on that, saying that he choked. That's kind of the language you'd expect to hear from him in regards to her, but that she kind of went out of the gate swinging, and she kept hitting him with those different moments. I mean, I've got a few quotes here from her. He'd rather have a puppet as president of the United States, when referring to Putin. On the day I was in the Situation Room monitoring the raid that brought Osama bin Laden to justice, he was hosting Celebrity Apprentice. She kept throwing these different jabs out, and they were all landing, and he was not as ferocious as people thought he would be last night. And it was a nice turn of events to kind of see him on the defensive and her on the attack, because it's usually the other way around.
But does it work for Trump? I mean, it's worked for him in the past. Him having to defend himself, defending his statements, has gotten him polls in the past.
What's got him polls in the past is that he's willing to say what others aren't willing to do, and willing to go after whether it's the people in his own party or Hillary Clinton and the Democrats. That's what got him his polls. When he's on the defensive, it doesn't look good, because his whole brand has been built around being this anti-establishment, aggressive candidate. So when you don't see him like that, when you kind of see him pushed into a corner, it doesn't look good for him. Well, and she did that a lot last night.
Lee, I want to ask you then, looking at Hillary's attack on Trump's, again, choking and saying that this Twitter war was, not very good for foreign policy, and it does give a glance at what Trump might do. Again, we are looking at a man who was a private citizen and a man who doesn't have much experience in the areas of foreign policy. Does this kind of coming out of nowhere, an attack against someone who runs on the ballot of being non-political, doing something that is very non-political?
Well, to that extent, Donald Trump louds himself as a very, very good businessman. He's really, really good at business, and he's really, really smart, and everything he does is over the top. I would expect at some point, considering how much money he's borrowed from foreign entities, that he's learned how to speak on an international stage. He's learned how not to offend the Chinese, who have loaned millions of dollars to his enterprises. He's learned how not to offend the Germans, who have loaned millions of dollars to his enterprises. He's just the only candidate that's willing to throw them back under the bus and talk about international money being a bad thing, even though it applies to him. So I don't think it's fair necessarily to say that he doesn't know or should be given a pass on how to speak. We're touting him essentially as a productive international businessman who's built an international brand. So I expect him to be able to do that and still carry himself on an international level, regardless of his political experience.
But one of the things that he's carried on for so long is that he is this type of character, someone that people do enjoy being if I might be able to use some French here, a ball buster. He's run on that platform. Do you think that this Twitter war, him going after a Mexican president and telling him that the things they discussed were the things they discussed. Does that work for him? Is that what?
I think it's the most presidential-like thing Donald Trump has done yet, because I expect my politicians to say one thing to my face and then do something different behind my back. So Donald Trump did the diplomatic thing. He went there, he didn't puff his chest out like he's the president of the Philippines. He went there and tactfully dealt with their president. Then he came back here and went back to pandering to all those voters that he loves to rally and he loves to have behind him, that appreciate what he says on the far end of the spectrum.
Well then, Rimi, let me ask you, looking at the response that we had from Hillary Clinton about voting for border security, and Trump saying that voting for border security is voting for exactly what he wants in the first place, which was a wall. Do you think that Hillary voting for border security does equal that wall that Trump talks about? And if not, what was she voting for?
Bottom line, a wall this is a much bigger complex issue than any of us can really come up with a solution for just at this table. Him preaching that the one-word answer is a wall is ignorant. Bottom line, it is absolutely ignorant. If there was a solution to it, we would already be there. I do feel like she is the candidate that is willing to look at all sides of the issues, really drill down what's happening, working with both countries. These are not issues that are just unique to the United States and Mexico. These are issues across the world. So I feel like she is taking the more diplomatic approach, looking at it not just from drawing the line in the sand, but also there are humans and human lives and families that are impacted by this. And I do feel like she has got a much more humanistic yet political response and action plan in process.
Do you think the voting public is seeing that in the same way that you're approaching?
No. I just feel like Donald Trump is so good at coming up with one-line answers, one-word answers to every problem that it clouds the real way to deal with any kind of issue. And just as she was saying, and all he could spew out was wall. That was disrespectful. It's not a response. It's not an accurate response. And he's very aggressive, as you mentioned, but very one way. He talks to a very passive audience. In the sense that he doesn't engage them, he doesn't engage in conversation, he just talks to them and has huge rallies, which is one way of doing it.
Well, Brenden, let me give you a chance.
I was going to just jump over that too. I think with Trump, he's a better market person than she is. She's not really a good seller for a product. And her product is good. It's a good brand, it's a good policy in regards to immigration and the other things. It's just she doesn't know how to sell it.
Well, how much was Clinton worth when she came into office, and how much is she worth now? She's done a great job of selling some product.
Yes. But I mean, her service to the American people, that's what she has, and what she wants to do, that's where she really falls flat, is in selling them that. She's not like Donald Trump in the fact that she can come up with these one-liners and these compelling arguments as to why you should vote for her. So that's what my biggest point of that was.
So, well, then let's go from the rhetoric that Trump and Hillary have just straight into Trump's and something that he said about bad hombres. Trump began his explanation of his attack on bad immigration by talking about Mexico. This was his first statement and began his anti-immigration rhetoric as a presidential candidate. We all remember that moment. But let's take a look at what Trump had to say about the, quote, bad hombres coming across the border.
We need the wall. The Border Patrol, ICE, they all want the wall. We stop the drugs. We shore up the border. One of my first acts will be to get all of the drug lords, all of the bad ones. We have some bad people in this country that have to go out. We're going to get them out. We're going to secure the border. And once the border is secured, at a later date, we'll make a determination as to the rest. But we have some bad hombres here, and we're going to get them out.
So something that we need to preface this by is this is a man who is talking about immigration policy. The language he uses might be a little bit more crass, but it has been taken by the media as this is an attack against Hispanic culture. This is an attack on him using language that is only reserved for people who are part of a certain community that are able to talk about the same people a part of that certain community. Do you think that the media's approach to this has been somewhat lopsided? I'm going to ask you, David. Do you think that...
He used the word hombres.
Yes.
Out of all of the things that Donald Trump could have ever said that they could have criticized, they criticized him using one word in a grammatically correct way. I mean, I think they ran out of things to attack Trump on that are new. I mean, really, let's think about it. I mean, they could have gone with, he says DEA and ICE, they want the wall. They don't want the wall. They want the money that they're going to get. Because you tell me a federal agency that doesn't want more money to do its mission. That, all right, let's start with that. Then he says there are some very bad people, there are some bad drug lords. Please, Donald Trump, please tell me how you are somehow going to crack down on these people that thus far in the, let's say, 30 years of the drug war, starting with Nixon, 30, 40 years, that we haven't been able to do already. And if there's one thing, the last thing that strikes me the most about Donald Trump, and it's the way that he phrases the type of businessman that he is. He says, drugs are coming in and the money is going out. I think he's more upset that we're losing money because drugs are being sold here and we're not taking a portion of it because of the type of businessman that he is. And I think that is what he is more upset about at a fundamental level.
Do you think he was trying to premise then the legalization of drugs as part of his campaign and saying
I
that
am
we're losing
surprised
revenue?
he did not go that way. I'm surprised he did not mention marijuana. I'm surprised that he didn't say this is why we should have marijuana, because he did not say like anything new. He said we need to go after the bad people. He's always said we need to go after the bad people. He just decided to say hombres. He could have said, like Hillary Clinton, I'm going to push for legalization of marijuana or decriminalization of drugs to help take away from what these drug cartels are actually doing and the profits that they're making. Hillary Clinton said, first 100 days, immigration policy. Great, new thing. You might have implied it before, but now you've made a commitment that we can hold you against. Donald Trump, you haven't said anything new except one word in Spanish.
And when you
That's because
Well,
he's talking
Brenden, yeah,
about
let me give you a
policy.
chance.
I mean, he doesn't talk about policy. That would involve some sort of policy element to it, and he doesn't talk policy, so it makes no sense for him to talk about.
He talks
decriminal-
policy just in incredibly vague and
He does not-
abstract terms, like wall and
He
disaster.
talks about ideas. He doesn't talk about policy.
He
I
talks
would say
about
that.
huge disasters
Well,
done
all right,
by
all right.
Hillary
Well,
Clinton.
well, again, let's go back to what we're talking about here. And of course, David, you already have your opinion set on this is a language that he just decided to use.
Yep.
But nonetheless, the Hispanic community, in some sense, in some way, has come out and said that this is not okay for them to be called that. Drug lords are not all Hispanic, and using language that in that way is somewhat offensive to people part of the Hispanic community. And I want to press you, David. Do you think that this language that he is using is showing his remarks retain the racism that he has?
I think he's just further emphasizing, as if he hasn't emphasized it enough with his opening speech of saying they're rapists and drug dealers, by saying hombres. I mean, this is nothing new. This is nothing new. This is just maybe a sprinkle on the horrific sundae that is Donald Trump with that wig on top that he has.
But
So-
to speak
Can I-
to immigration,
Yeah, go
if I
ahead,
could,
Lee. Go ahead,
please.
Lee.
Here's my biggest thing. We continue to talk about immigration as if we only have one border in this country.
Absolutely.
And if you're aware or not, back in August, 1,500 Canadian citizens, thanks to a strong gust of wind, were blown across a river into Michigan. 1,500 people were now illegal immigrants or whatever because of a gust of wind. If that doesn't tell you how insecure our northern border is, not yet, as Donald Trump said, we need to attack French Canadians or we need to look at our Canadian problem or Canadian rapists. He's always addressed his immigration problems towards the Latino, Hispanic, Mexican community without addressing it. He makes it under the guise of security, but we're not talking about security here. We're talking about looking at people who look differently than us, seeking out the same opportunity that his father came here looking for, but they're doing it at a different period of time, a period of time after things like the Chinese Exclusion Act and Operation Wetback.
Well, I'll give you the last comment on this
I was
part.
gonna say, I actually have 2 points, and the first one, I'm semi-defending Donald Trump. I never thought I'd say those words in my life. I will say the hombre comments, he was mostly talking about drug lords and criminals. So I would refrain from somehow blanking that to all people of Hispanics. But my second point, that was not the word he wanted to say. Let's be honest, too.
I think it was the word he wanted to say.
No, that's not the word he
it.
wanted to
It's the
say.
word that he
That's
said, yeah.
It's the word he said. Just like when people in the South used to call black people boy, that's not the word they wanted to say. That's the word they could say and get away with it.
Well,
so that's
looking-
what I think it is on that.
Well, looking
hombre
at the
comment.
history of the comments, let's look at the history of both the candidates. Hillary Clinton persisted with her experience that she has had, that Trump has attacked, as being fruitful and beneficial for the good of the American people. But it was when Hillary Clinton compared herself to Trump that some real sparks lit up the room. Let's take a look at some of those comments.
On the day when I was in the Situation Room, monitoring the raid that brought Osama bin Laden to justice. He was hosting the Celebrity Apprentice. So I'm happy to compare my 30 years of experience, what I've done for this country, trying to help in every way I could, especially kids and families, get ahead and stay ahead, with your 30 years, and I'll let the American people make that decision.
And that's what she's doing. She's allowing the American people to make that decision on Election Day, but nonetheless, she did give a list of both things that she has accomplished and Trump's accomplished. Now, something that we want to touch on again is Trump has been a private citizen and that Hillary Clinton has been a career politician. Comparing those two lists is very hard, and for a lot of American people, for a lot of the American voting public, there are people that are more interested in having someone that is a private citizen than having a career politician. And both sides can be heard about those 30 years. So Rimi, I want to ask you, when it comes to Trump and Hillary, who do you think makes the better argument? A career politician or a private individual who has made billions of dollars?
So let me back up.
Sure.
Trump is not an average citizen. He has been in the public light for over 20 years. Don't be fooled for 1 second that he wasn't gunning after this. In 2000, he actually had a campaign started and then pulled out. So for us to not judge him as a politician, he's known all along for many years he wanted to get into politics. So his behavior for the last 20, 30 years should not be excluded. And if you think for 1 second he's just a private citizen, he has fooled everyone. So, having said that, though, we should judge him on all this time. And yes, I do think that what he has done he has really been an entertainer. And so, for him to use the card of potentially, well, I'm not a politician and therefore I wouldn't be in a situation room. But no, you are a very internationally, globally known person who has created such a brand that you are out there. Yeah, you can definitely say that he has put himself out there, but not as a politician, and no, I cannot see what good he has done for the public.
So then let me press you on that. I'm going to give you a little bit of a novel question here.
Fire away.
What is the best thing in his experience that you find in the past 30 years that stands as a testament for him being the president?
You are really reaching there. I'm just going to have to think about that one. I might need more than a second to come up with that.
Well, then Brenden, let me give you an opportunity to talk on this one. I'll ask you a question here.
Yeah.
Do you think that between the 30 years of Trump and the 30 years of Hillary, that Hillary makes a better case, or do you think Trump makes a better case?
Hands down. I would say anyone else who had ran would have made a better case. And this argument always bothered me when Ben Carson and him and even Carly Fiorina would make that argument that somehow they were more qualified to run for politics. I find that to be such an asinine argument. Like, okay, tomorrow I'm going to decide I'm going to be the top neurosurgeon in the country, so I'm not going to need any experience for that. I'm just going to go in and do it. It's completely ridiculous to somehow say that because you're an outsider in the system, you can be the best in it. And it always bothered me that they would all say that. And I'll give Carly Fiorina credit. She actually ran for office, whereas Trump and Carson had really never done this before.
So then, Lee, let me give you an opportunity here. Again, the 30 years question that we have. I will make the argument again that this is a private citizen and as such shouldn't be compared as a politician. That's what a lot of the people from the Trump campaign have been saying. He did have his own show. He was a businessman who made many, many millions and billions of dollars and has expanded his reach across 2 oceans. Do you think that this man has some sort of worth when it comes to being a presidential candidate?
As a presidential candidate, no. I think as a cabinet member, absolutely. I think there's a lot of value to what Donald Trump is saying. I think there's a lot of value to a lot of the issues that he's raised with the good old boys network and corporate cronyism and the things that we're seeing. The problems that him and Bernie Sanders shone a light on in this year's election have existed for a while, and yet this is the first time they're being talked about. So I'd like to give him credit for rallying the far right the same way Bernie Sanders rallied the far left. He's the one that just happened to extend through this whole thing. As far as just having the leadership skills to lead this country, he's unfit. He's been unfit in leading a majority of the things he's done. He's had some successful endeavors, but we can tout how often he's been unsuccessful as well. And I don't think that qualifies him to be the president.
Well, going from a candidate like no other, let's go to a debate that is like no other. This debate is obviously like no other, and that is no better shown in when a Republican nominee for the President of the United States turned to the Democratic nominee of the President of the United States and called her a, quote, nasty woman. Let's watch that moment live.
I am on record as saying that we need to put more money into the Social Security Trust Fund. That's part of my commitment to raise taxes on the wealthy. My Social Security, payroll, contribution will go up, as will Donald's, assuming he can't figure out how to get out of it. But what we want to do is to replenish the Social
Such a
Security
nasty
Trust Fund by making sure that we have sufficient resources.
So my question about this debate actually pertains to future debates. I don't think we can possibly say that what we have seen might top what's going to come to us in the next 4 years. So I'm going to ask, I'll ask you, David, here, do you think this debate, this election, has tarnished the PC culture, as in to say that being politically correct and covering all issues and policies and maintaining some sort of form of resonance as a politician has been tarnished because we're literally watching nominees call each other names?
I think that I think you've kind of conjoined a few things here. So,
ahead.
you know, the PC culture, Donald Trump has been so anti-PC that, you know, you think he owned a Mac. One of the things to do with Trump, though, is that he is that he's very much anti-PC, and he's very much I'm going to say how it is and what it is.
Of course,
and
yes.
what I want.
Go ahead.
As far
cameras will allow
as the
it.
nastiness, Donald Trump has always been nasty. He called her a nasty woman. You know, I think that is exactly what he intended. He exactly intended to say that. Whether in that moment or I'm sure his advisors, as soon as they saw that, were like, your numbers are low enough with women as it is. Why do you keep doing it?
Right.
It's because he can't help himself. He can't help himself. And even as much as he could say a nasty woman, and almost objectively somebody could say he was just referring to her, his reputation is so bad with women, and it shows that he can't help himself, that it just pushes him down even further. And it does tarnish America's reputation abroad more than it already has been with Donald
Lee,
Trump.
I'll give you the opportunity.
Everything about Donald Trump reminds me of a high schooler, so I want to take you back to middle school, high school time frame. When somebody made a comment about you and you didn't have an immediate rebuttal, what was your response?
Your mother.
Your mother, exactly.
Or something.
That's what I thought
Yeah.
of, some way to just juvenilely and pedantically respond. I think he wanted to say your mama, and just that's what came out.
Yeah.
But it was so uncalled for, it was unprofessional.
I mean, that's,
Go ahead,
it's
Brenden.
been the whole time. So I mean, this is not surprising. It's become a riot at this point. It's funny. It's you say what you want about her, and plenty of people have. But I mean, she tries at least to carry herself with some dignity and class and stuff. And then she's pulled into this, and it's like, oh, well, screw it. I mean, if he's going to go low, I'll go low.
Well, Brenden, you said it right there, and Rimi, I'll give you a chance. You said it right there. This debate is funny. Are debates meant to be funny?
No, they are absolutely not. This is democracy hanging on the line, and this should not be funny. I mean, we thought it was funny. Remember when the Tea Party came about, and they all said these crazy things, and we were like, oh, this is funny. And then they got control of the House, and it went bad for a while. I mean,
You can't exactly say that. You know, there is a place for humor in debates.
No,
when
absolutely.
when Ronald Reagan
and there-
said, you know, I
and there
won't
is a
let
place.
my
Yeah, but it's
candidates
not
use
the whole debate should not
there
be
is a
humor.
place. There is
And
a
that's what
place.
it was.
There is a place. But let me just give an opportunity to Rimi here to go ahead and mention what you're going to say.
Well, I was just going to say, for somebody that has inserted themselves into politics on so many different levels for over 20 years, that, again, a 1-2 word insult
Yes.
just was so juvenile and so Donald Trump. And I do think, though, that he has reawakened America on different levels. Not necessarily for him, though, but I think these people actually there's an issue that they are struggling with. So that's what's driving them. As far, not necessarily I want Trump, but this is an issue that I'm dealing with, and maybe I agree with how it's being approached on this end, so let me hang my hat here.
Then let me give you this final question then.
Sure.
If the next election is even more entertaining, would you want it to be?
No, because at this point in the game, I will be very honest with you, I'm afraid of people not wanting to run, looking at, do I want to put myself through this?
Right.
Do I want to put my family through this? Do I want to put my community through this? I can see viable candidates taking a step back.
Although we might be afraid for the next election, I'm afraid that is our time. I want to thank our panelists and you for watching our show and letting you know while all the other shows, just like To Ramble, will be right here for you on The Scramble. Thank you and see you again.